Last episode, we saw Jesus go through the most unjust trial imaginable. He was convicted and sentenced to death. Now, while this was happening, Peter was close by, watching in the shadows, and little did he know he was about to fulfill the prophecy Jesus told about him. Stick around to find out more. Recorded at the Running H Studio, you're listening to Venture Tabernacle. It's like venture capital, except that the investment is made in your soul. This is where America hangs out to talk about anything and everything from a biblical perspective. I'm your host, Ty Hervey. Join me as we learn to view the world through the objective lens of the Bible. Hey, folks. Welcome back for another episode of the Venture Tabernacle podcast, and specifically the Sunday sermon, where we are going through the gospel according to Mark, verse by verse and story by story. Our text for today is Mark chapter 14, verse 66 through 72. I'll read it for you. It says, "And as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, 'You also were with the Nazarene Jesus.' But he denied it, saying, 'I neither know nor understand what you mean.' And he went out into the gateway, and the rooster crowed. And the servant girl saw him and began again to say to the bystanders, 'This man is one of them.' But again he denied it. And after a little while the bystanders again said to Peter, 'Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean.' But he began to invoke a curse on himself and swear, 'I do not know this man of whom you speak.' And immediately the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, 'Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times.' And he broke down and wept." That's our text for today. And if you remember, just a few verses earlier, in verse 27 through 31, Jesus made a prediction about this very story. He warned Peter that he would deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. Of course, Peter in his pride said, "No way, Jose, I will follow you even unto death." And it is amazing how quickly that courage faded when the going got tough. In our text today, Peter had all the right intentions. He wanted so badly to follow Jesus' example, to be faithful, and he failed miserably. This is undoubtedly the lowest point in Peter's life. He had followed Jesus for 3 years. He lived with him every day. He ate with him, laughed with him, fellowshiped with him. Peter was in the inner circle of the 3 most loved and trusted disciples. He had participated in and witnessed countless miracles of Jesus healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and changing lives that were broken. And even through all of that, when the going got tough, he lied. And he said he had never met Jesus. Not only did he lie about knowing Jesus, he went so far as to say, "Let me be cursed if I am lying about knowing Jesus." So how is it that a man who was so close with Jesus, who just the day before had confessed that he was willing to die for Jesus, turned into such a coward in an instant? Well, my submission is the issue was his pride. Peter wanted to stay true to Jesus, but he drew on the wrong source of power if he was ever going to be successful. Peter was so proud of his ability that he failed to rely on the power of God to get him through this tough time. And spoiler alert, each of us have done the same in our own lives. There have been times in our lives where we thought we could power through something on our own, where we said, "I don't need help from someone else. I'm not going to pray about this because I already know the answer." And we let pride step in and make a mess of things in our life. Peter's issue in our story was that he let his pride control his actions. And it didn't start in this moment. No, it had been building for a while. It started all the way back in the warning that Jesus gave to Peter. When Jesus warned Peter about his upcoming failure, Peter's response should have been, "How can I avoid this? How can you help me not make this mistake, Jesus?" Instead, it was pride that spoke, and Peter said that he would never do something like that. The first mistake Peter made was to fail to heed Jesus' warning. And each of us need to hear that very same warning. The warning in Scripture is that if you are a Christian, you have to be on guard against sin and pride constantly. Because yes, we are a new creation in Jesus when we become believers, but we still live in sinful bodies of flesh. In other words, we have two natures at war within us constantly. The new creation that wants to do right and follow Jesus, and the old flesh that fights us every step of the way. Let us learn from Peter's mistakes and listen to the warning that we are selfish, sinful people at our core. Now, the second failure Peter made that led to this moment was that he failed to pray. In the garden, before Jesus was captured, the disciples were commanded to pray. Specifically, they should have been praying for strength to do what was right in the coming struggle. But what did they do instead? Well, if you read the story preceding this, they proceeded to fall asleep. Now, let me ask you this. If you knew that you had the power to overcome anything, any struggle that came your way, but that power only came through prayer, would you sleep? Or would you get on your knees and beg the Lord to move and save the day? The disciples knew better. The prayer in the garden was their last shot at preparation before the cross, and they slept. They knew what was right, but the sinful body of flesh got the best of them. So if you're struggling with sin, and you always will be if you're a Christian, use prayer as a weapon to get you to safety. Peter missed this, and he failed. The third thing that led to Peter's failure was that he acted too quickly. Very rarely does God require us to make split-second decisions that have major consequences. Usually, God gives us lots of time to think and pray about big decisions in life. The actions of Peter were not measured. They were quick and uncalculated. As he stood in the courtyard trying to stay close to Jesus without being caught, he didn't plan his response if someone were to identify him with Jesus. I imagine he had a million things running through his mind at the time, but he failed to plan ahead. Peter was almost instantly recognized, even in the darkness of the night. He had a Galilean accent that was obvious to others. It would be the equivalent of a Southern accent in New York City. You know, the times that I have gone up north, they have spotted me immediately like a fish out of water because of my accent. They did the same to Peter because of where he came from. And when he was first identified and denied Christ, he should have taken a step back to plan his response if he was asked again. He knew that he didn't want to deny Christ, but he failed to make a plan on how to do that. For us, many times we know that we want to honor Christ, but when the opportunity presents itself to us, we fail. If you don't make a plan ahead of time to honor God, most likely you won't. Let me give you some real-life examples. Hopefully, you know that the Bible teaches us to wait until marriage to have sex. It's something God created for the context of marriage. And if you didn't know that, well, now you do. And God planned it that way because the only way that sex is beneficial to your life is in the context of a marriage between one man and one woman. But how often does the Christian who knows this truth, that wants to wait and do things right, get caught up in the moment and make a decision that cannot be reversed? If you don't have a plan to say no and get out of that situation, more often than not, you are going to fail in the moment. How about this? You want to stand up for your faith when your friend group starts doing something that you know is wrong. And you want to speak up and guide them to what's right and be a beacon of truth. But if you don't have a plan ahead of time, more often than not, you're going to freak out and keep your mouth shut and fail in the moment. Failure is easy. and it's to be expected, to be frank, in the Christian life. Just because you follow Jesus doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. Far from it, actually. And as long as we're alive, we're going to struggle with this issue of pride and sin. And Peter serves as a warning that even the most devoted followers of Jesus will fail if they don't prepare properly and depend on God for their strength, not your own ability. So hear me on this. Even though you have made the same mistakes as Peter, even though you have messed up royally at times in your life, maybe you're in the middle of one of those mess ups right now, but there is still hope for your future, because just like Peter, this is not the end of the story. In case you're not familiar with how Peter's story ends, I'll give you the short version of it. Even though Peter failed Jesus and denied him 3 times, Jesus still forgave Peter. Jesus still used Peter to start the church that we are still a part of today. Jesus still loved Peter. And if you want some reading to do this week, look up John 21:15 through 19. It's the story of Jesus forgiving Peter and commissioning him to spread the gospel for the rest of his life. We learn from Peter's life that failure is only final if you quit. We learn that pride will take you down. It always does. It's only a matter of time. We learn that if we want to live the life God has called us to, we have to rely on the power of God alone, not anything we can produce. Any attempt to live a Christian life on our own power or ability will fall apart like a 2X hat in a rainstorm. So surrender and put your faith and hope in Jesus Christ.